The 2025 NFL schedule is dropping as we speak, and the New York Giants have one tall mountain to climb this season. Let's talk about how these games shape up and how they could affect how well the Giants do or don't do. Next on the Big Blue Breakdown, live. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Big Blue Breakdown Live. So glad you could join us once again tonight. I'm Paul Dottino, and we are back to our usual time, Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And could it be any better for us that this was the night at 8 o'clock when the NFL dropped its schedule release? So what I've done for many years now, as you guys know, this is going to be my 43rd consecutive season of covering New York Giants football. And over the years, I have gotten a very good feel from the players, the coaches, and the front office about the things they look for in a schedule. Some of the elements that strategically or logistically can be positives or negatives for a team as they try to navigate their season. So every year, I usually talk about this on the Big Blue Kickoff Live show. The last couple of seasons, the moment the schedule came out, I posted written text of my very specific and exclusive analysis from the team's perspective. I get inside the mind of the team. This is not a fan commentary. This is a team-based commentary of how an NFL team would feel about the different bumps, potholes, and hills that they've been given in the schedule by the National Football League. So that's what we're going to talk about first tonight. I'm going to give you my analysis of what I saw. What are the favorable elements to the Giants' schedule, and what maybe are the less favorable elements to the Giants' schedule. Now, once I get that out of the way, we are going to take your chats, your audio calls, and your video calls. The plan is to be here till perhaps 9:30 tonight. We're probably going to go about 90 minutes. That's what I think we'll do, because I want you guys to have a chance to chime in. Since the schedule just came out a couple of minutes ago officially, this truly is your chance to actually verbalize what you may like or what you may not like in the Giants' schedule. Now, we knew the Giants already were going to have a home-and-home series against the NFC East. They would have home games with the Packers, the Vikings, the Chiefs, the Chargers, and the 49ers, and road games with the Bears, Broncos, Lions, Raiders, Patriots, and Saints. Now, we also know the Giants have the league's toughest strength of schedule to navigate based on the 2024 standings. Their opponents last year finished at 166 and 123 for a 574 winning percentage, and the Giants will have 10 games against 2024 playoff teams, tied for the third most in the National Football League. Now, a couple of other elements going in. Since 2017, only the 2021 Steelers and the 2023 Eagles have qualified for the postseason after having navigated the hardest strength of schedule based on the previous season. So in recent history, that setup does not bode very well for the Giants. Now, I'll give you something that actually does bode well for them. The Giants are coming off of a 3-14 season, but at least 4 teams have made the NFL playoffs in each of the past 5 seasons after not qualifying for the postseason the year before. In fact, at least one club has gone from worst or tied for last to first place in its division in 20 of the past 23 seasons in the NFL. It did not happen in 2024, but in 20 of the 23 past seasons. As you know, the Giants finished last in the NFC East. Now, since 2020, the Giants, since 2000, I'm sorry, the Giants, oh, wait a minute. I'm reading that wrong. It is 2020. The Giants have not done well as night owls. Over their last 17 primetime games, they are 2-15. During that tenure, that is the worst primetime record in the National Football League. So these are some things to keep in mind as we start to pick apart exactly what the National Football League has given the New York Giants. All right, so one of the things I want to do as we go through this, and I think it's important to remember that this is strictly a diagnostic that I do based on, again, the logistics and certain factors that coaches, players, and front office people look at. Here are the favorable elements from a competitive and logistical standpoint. The Giants have 2 non-playoff teams in the first 5 weeks of the schedule. September 14th at Dallas and October 5th at New Orleans. We've told you many times over the years that teams usually don't get their sea legs under them until after the first 4 games of the season, especially now that they only play 3 preseason games and many of the starters don't get to play a lot. So it takes a month to kind of really identify and find out where you are. Well, the Giants are trying to become a much more competitive team. And so they've got to have 2 of their softer teams, if you will, in that first month, if they're going to have a better chance of trying to walk or crawl, if you will, because right now they've been on the ground. So to get 2 of last year's non-playoff teams in the first 5 weeks, that could bode well. Because right there, I know Dallas is a team that's had the Giants' number in recent years, but they were not very good last year either. And Lord knows the New Orleans Saints, now that Derek Carr is retired, who knows what they're going to be. So that could help the Giants get off to a decent first month of the season. Point number 2, and there are 6 positive points that are favorable for the Giants in this schedule. 3 of the final 4 games are at home, including 3 home games against the NFC. That's December 14th against Washington, the 21st against Minnesota, and the season finale against the NFC East rival Cowboys in Week 18. That's a flexible date according to the NFL. It is always hopeful to play teams in your division or in your conference down the stretch, because as you make your push at the end of the season, you're hoping to try to impact the tiebreakers that could potentially put you somewhere in the wild card race. So that part is a positive. There were no 3-game road swings on the Giants' schedule. Now, the NFL usually tries to avoid 3-game road swings for every team in the league. They can't always do it. Well, they avoided it with the Giants this year, so that's another positive. Positive number 4, minimal travel over the first 4 regular season games. After a difficult month of training camp and preseason, at least the Giants don't have to necessarily go very far logistically to deal with their first month. That could make things a little bit easier for the coaching staff as they try to prepare to get this season off on the right foot. You have a short opening day trip to Washington on September 7th. Then you've got to visit to Dallas, kind of a medium trip, and then home games on September 21st, Sunday night against Kansas City, and the Los Angeles Chargers on September 28th. So minimal travel, only 1 medium-range trip to Dallas in the first 4 games of the season. That does help the coaches an awful lot as they try to prepare. Number 5, only 1 road game with potential serious winter weather concerns. That would be December 1st at New England. Now, why do I mention that? Well, because we all know that bad winter weather, number one, it can cause delays for your team on the way back home, and that does screw up the body clock of your team, of your players. It does screw up a little bit with your coach's preparation in terms of their sleep and also how they're trying to prepare for the next opponent as they immediately turn around and do their game reviews and then try to move forward with what's going to be coming up the following week. So you don't ever want to get caught in nasty weather delays coming down the stretch of the season, nor do you necessarily want nasty winter weather causing all kinds of havoc with the game, whether it's fumbles, interceptions, or Lord knows what it could be. You don't want to leave anything to chance because that could just cause all kinds of haywire during the course of the game. So after December 1st, when the Giants go to New England for a primetime game, and we know that Foxborough at the beginning of December could be nasty and cold, and you even could have some precipitation. There's no doubt about that. But then they're home for the Commanders. They're home for the Vikings. They will have to go to Las Vegas to play the Raiders, but that's in a dome. And then they finish up at home against the Cowboys. Now, you're going to say to me, well, Paul, can't there be tough winter weather at MetLife Stadium? Well, sure they can be. But at least you don't have to worry about winter delays in terms of getting back to the airport, getting back to the plane, worrying about air traffic control, and worried about getting your team home, and guys not sleeping well on the plane, guys not being comfortable on the plane. At least 3 of the final 4 games are home, and the one road game against the Raiders, that's not a winter weather issue, being that it's in a dome. Point number 6, that is a favorable one for the Giants' schedule. They have 11 games set for the standard start time of Sunday at 1 p.m., pending flex scheduling and the Week 17 and 18 TBAs at Las Vegas and at home against Dallas. There is only one late Sunday afternoon game, October 19th at Denver, and 3 primetime games, including 2 at home, which is a great benefit. September 21st is Sunday night against Kansas City. October 9th is a Thursday night game at home against Philadelphia. And then December 1st is the Monday night game against New England. And fortunately, that is on the East Coast, so that doesn't necessarily add angst to the trip, because West Coast games, when you're coming back from a primetime game, it just adds to the backup in your schedule, screws up your body clock, screws up your sleep and your preparation. The Giants lucked out here. 2 home primetime games, and the only road primetime game is right here on the East Coast, just a short skip away from Foxborough. So those are the 6 positive elements, if you will, from a competitive and logistical standpoint in the Giants' 2025 schedule. So now we flip it to the other side. And as we told you, it's a very daunting schedule. There's no question about that. It's a very difficult schedule. And we know that that is impediment number 1. But we have other things to talk about. A fast start's going to be critical for this team as they try to get back to respectability. You can't be going 0 for 3, 0 for 4, 1 and 4, 1 and 5 out of the box. That's not going to work very well for a team that's trying to build confidence and trying to crawl out of the quicksand. The Giants start the season with 2 divisional matchups and 4 NFC East games in the first 8 weeks of the season, which makes it very, very difficult to make up ground late during the conference schedule within the division. I am always one who prefers as many division games later in the season as possible, because if you don't get off to a good start, you can always point to those divisional games later in the season as hope that if you turn it on and you get into a hot streak down the stretch, you can make up ground quickly without having to scoreboard watch on the rivals within your division. Well, the league did not do the Giants any favors at all today. Again, you play 6 games in your division. 4 of the 6 are in the first 8 weeks of the Giants' schedule. Simply put, they cannot afford to stumble out of the blocks. They cannot afford to get behind the 8 ball early. If they go 0-2 to Washington and Dallas, not only is it 0-2, but it's already 0-2 in the division. That would be extremely painful. This will be the first time the Giants have opened the season with 2 straight road games within the NFC East, we mentioned Washington and Dallas, since the 1984 campaign. That's right, folks. 2 road games in the NFC East to start the schedule has not happened for the Giants since 1984. That's how long ago since this has happened. It also marks the first NFC East battles in the first and second weeks of the season since the 2009 season. And it's only the 3rd time that they've had to play 2 NFC East teams in the first 2 weeks of the schedule since 2000. As I said, this is not something you really want. You'd rather play your divisional foes toward the end of the year. And the league did not help them this time. It will be the Giants' first NFC East road opener since 2019. And by the way, when you talk about Dallas and Washington, we all know how frequently the Giants see them early in the schedule. I had to look this up because I just said to myself, isn't it always funny that Washington and Dallas always seem to be a September game? Well, the Giants have played either Washington and or Dallas within the first 2 weeks of the schedule 12 different times since the 2010 season. Think about that. This is only 2025. And this will be the 12th time. Less favorable element number 2. The Giants have to play the rugged Philadelphia Eagles in a home-and-home series on October 9th and October 26th, sandwiched around their second longest road trip of the season to the Denver Broncos on October 19th. These games are only a small part of a taxing 6-game stretch that is a gauntlet for the Giants from September 21st to November the 2nd. Those 6 games feature 5 games against 2024 playoff teams, including Kansas City, the Los Angeles Chargers, and the one game that does not involve a playoff team is the New Orleans Saints. The other 3, as I just mentioned, 2 against Philly and 1 against Denver. 5 out of that 6-game stretch were last year's playoff teams. But again, when you're playing 10 games against playoff teams from last year, you had to know that there was going to be one gigantic pothole in the road at some point during the schedule. Well, there it is. There it is. From September 21st through November the 2nd. That is a gauntlet. The third and final of the least favorable elements in the Giants' schedule, the bye comes in Week 14. That is December 7th. That means the Giants will have gone through 3 preseason games and 13 regular season games for a combined 17 battles before they actually take a break for their bye. I've always said I favor the bye in Week 10 of the regular season, give or take a week before or after, because that's the midpoint when you consider the preseason games. or at least close to it. Not to be. No, not to be this time. The bye comes in week 14. This can be physically grueling for a team to have to go through a full 17-week stretch before they get to take a break. It can be really rough on your injuries. And let's not forget, it's awfully late in the season for the coaches who use the bye week as a chance to self-scout, to make adjustments and to make tweaks for the second part of their schedule. They always talk about how the bye week is key for them because it's the only time they truly get to sit back for a couple of days, take a breath, re-look at their own video from the previous games, and figure out, okay, we're not worried about the upcoming opponent. We got a bye week this week. We're going to worry about tweaking our own stuff. How can we make this team better within this locker room? Well, if you're not getting that bye week until December 7th, there's only 4 games left in the season. That does not bode very well for any coaching staff that desperately needs the time to make adjustments to try to salvage whatever is left of their season if they're going to make a stretch run and be a competitive football team. So the bye week at 14 could prove to be very painful for the Giants. Again, this all depends on circumstances. The 6 positives I gave you and the 3 negatives I gave you, those can all vary depending upon the circumstances, injuries, the way things break and fall, and how certain guys play and how guys merge and how guys maybe underachieve. But all things being equal, using competitive and logistical factors that players, coaches, and front office staff look at, I've now given you 6 favorable points and 3 very, very large, less favorable points. I'm not so sure that the 3 unfavorable points don't outweigh the 6 favorable ones. But it is what it is. The Giants are going to be facing a lot of difficult competition this year, and they're really going to have to earn their way. We think it's a better roster for sure, but if they're going to wind up with a better record, well, they're going to have to navigate some very difficult detour signs, potholes, and hilly terrain as they try to get to the end of this 2025 season intact and continue their march back to respectability. Okay, well, that's my analysis. Now it's time for your thoughts on the Giants' schedule. Did you agree or disagree with any of the things that I've described to you? Again, I go through a tried and true system that I've been using for many, many years. Was there something you saw that I didn't see that might certainly pique some interest? Or do you just have a personal preference about something on the Giants' schedule that you want to talk about? Well, we're here. I'm going to get to your chats now. You can also give me a call on this live stream. The link is right there at the bottom of your screen. If you want to make it a video call, I'll take a video call too. Use that same link on the bottom of the screen and make sure you activate your mic and your camera, or not your camera if you don't want to be seen. So let's get to the comments. We start out, and Gotti Style 12 says, "Let's go, Paul. Can't wait for the season and can't wait to see you like every year. Go Giants." Okay, Gotti Style 12. Big Blue says, "Evening, Paul. Win the first 2 division games on the road. Set the tone. I do like the bye week in 14. Coach better play the starters into the third quarter in the preseason games." Big Blue, you just touched on a very sensitive topic for me. I've always believed that the starters should play more in the preseason. No, I shouldn't say always. I've had to adopt that belief because over the last decade or so, it seems that coaches just don't want to do that. They are, and understandably so, concerned about injuries. And with the salaries that many of these guys are making, it's a double whammy. If you get a player hurt during a preseason game, not only do you not have the availability of that player and you're forced to play a backup in that spot as you begin the season, but if he was a very expensive player, that's salary cap money that's sitting on the trainer's room table, and you can't do anything with that money to go out and maybe get a veteran free agent who's been sitting around throughout August just waiting to latch on with a team that may need a new starter because somebody got hurt. It's a double whammy. It really is. If you wind up getting a starter hurt during the preseason, I do understand that. But I also know if they're starting the schedule against two NFC East teams, wow. The last thing I'd want to be doing is sputtering along during those first 2 weeks. I would want to make a statement, Big Blue. I would want my wheels very well oiled, and I would want to hit the ground running, and I would want to prove to those teams right out of the gate that the NFC East is in for a battle, that the Giants are back in this fight. That's what I would want to do. And I think the best way to do that is to make sure that some of these starters, particularly along the offensive line and in the secondary, get more reps than coaches otherwise feel comfortable doing. But that's just me. It's a personal opinion. Brian Daboll runs this team. He will do so as he sees fit. I don't know what his plans are going to be. But be that as it may, we move on. Thank you, Big Blue, for the comment. Isaac Morris says, so Gabe that's Gabe Davis, former Bills and Jaguars receiver. He says, so Gabe had a tryout, then we re-signed little Jordan Humphrey. No. No, to my knowledge, you saw the reports that Gabe Davis, who was coming off a meniscus repair from last season, you saw reports that he was to have visited the Giants. It is my belief that that was a due diligence visit. I think he was hoping to check in with Brian Daboll, and I think him and Joe Shane, who both have said nice things about Gabe Davis before. We've talked about this even on last week's show. And, I don't know how Gabe Davis fits any higher than maybe the fourth receiver on the Giants roster. If you sign him because you're thinking of putting him ahead of Jalen Hyatt. Davis does not play special teams, and I don't necessarily know that he's looking to be the fourth receiver on anybody's depth chart either. So I don't know where his desire is right now. But remember, he's coming off of a meniscus repair. So I suspect he's probably not really ready to go anyway. So in my opinion, and I will not, go any further than just simply give you an educated guess. I think this was more of a due diligence, checking in. How you doing, Gabe? We remember you from Buffalo. We knew you were a good player up there. You did some really nice things. Hey, let's talk about what might happen down the road if we're interested in signing you and you're interested in being here. How serious might we be about picking up the phone? How serious might you be to answer that call? Are you looking for a starting job? Are you looking to be a backup? How far along are you with your knee rehab? I would say my educated guess is that's more or less what this probably was. But I cannot be 100% sure. I was not in on those meetings. Aiden says, good evening. And I say, good evening back to you. Christine says, good evening, Paul. Your thoughts on the brutal schedule? I have high hopes. There will be hard competition this camp season. Let's go Big Blue Breakdown, chat friends. Let's go New York Giants. Okay. Well, I've given you the whole breakdown, Christine. You've gotten my very detailed analysis. And Isaac says, I hope you're feeling better, Christine, and so does everybody who is part of our Big Blue Breakdown community. Big Blue says, need to stay healthy. There's no question about that. Isaac Moore says, rough schedule after the worst season. Thanks, NFL. Well, Isaac, you got to remember something. The schedule is predetermined outside of 3 games by the divisional rotation that has already been set up by the league. And then those other games simply become cross games with the division that you're supposed to be matched up against that year. And then also there's a wild card game. That would be the 17th game on the schedule that depends on the placement of your team in the standings during the previous season. So it is what it is. We all knew who the Giants' opponents were going to be, home and away, for quite a while now. I mean, since the last day of the regular season. So, the only thing we didn't know were the kickoff times and the dates of the games. And as I've explained many, many times over, yes, there are strategies and analysis that can be used off of a schedule, as I just tried to show you at the beginning of this program. There are definitely factors that make a good schedule or a bad schedule, even though your opponents are locked in for months. Big Blue says, Paul, congrats on season number 43. Spider Lockhart. Yes, Carl Spider Lockhart. One of my favorite players back in the late 60s and early 70s. A safety who was small and wiry. That's why they called him Spider. Carl Lockhart, if you will. His first name, C-A-R-L, Carl Lockhart. Spider came into the Giants originally as a cornerback and then converted to being a star safety. Also, when he came into the league as a corner, he also did some kick returns. I don't know if you remember that, Big Blue, but he did some of that and then became a very high-quality safety in this league. And, boy, he was not afraid to hit people. It didn't matter that he was wiry and spindly. Carl Spider Lockhart, he was all arms and legs, but he always stuck his nose in there. And that's what made him a very big fan favorite. His last season with the Giants was in 1975, the season that they played at Shea Stadium. And Bill Arnsparger had come in to take over as the Giants head coach, and he was really looking to change things up. And he saw Lockhart as one of the old guard. And Lockhart didn't make it back to the Giants in 1976 when they opened the new Giants Stadium in the Meadowlands, and he wound up retiring. Never played for another team. He was true and true, not only Big Blue, but only Blue. So I'm kind of glad you brought up that name because Spider Lockhart gives Giants fans really great memories. Christine says December 1st is her birthday. Well, it really is kind of early to wish you a happy birthday. I mean, it's only May. But we'll try to remember when the time comes, Christine. Thank you. Isaac Moore says Knicks close it out tonight. Yeah, I get it. I get it, Isaac. I certainly hope so. MB Goblin says, heck of a schedule, but it'll be fun to have the home opener be a spotlight game against the Chiefs. Yeah, Patrick Mahomes coming to MetLife Stadium. And you never know how long he's going to play. You won't see Kansas City in all likelihood unless a placement in the standings winds up working over the years somehow. But he wouldn't be scheduled to come back to play the Giants for another 8 years. I don't know. Is he going to be playing 8 years from now? Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. So it will be interesting. This certainly will be, a chance to see Travis Kelce, if that really matters to you, because, there was speculation he might even retire after this past season. So it would be a good chance to see him. Chris Jones, this outstanding All-Pro defensive tackle. And certainly it'll be great to see Spags. I can't wait to see Spags come back. That's for sure. MB Goblin says, of course, they listened in to you and John begging to not see be the Chiefs and the Chargers back to back. You know, when we were on Big Blue Kickoff live yesterday, we talked about preferences. We weren't predicting what the league was going to do. We kind of gave our preferences, what we'd like to see. And the one thing, as you may have recalled, MB Goblin, is that, you know, I had said get two of the softer teams on the schedule in the first month, virtually 5 weeks. And actually, that worked out extremely well for the Giants because the 4 softer teams on the schedule would be Chicago, Las Vegas, New Orleans, and New England. And as I said to you at the top of this analysis, yes, in the first 5 weeks, the Giants wound up with 2 softer teams. Now, I don't necessarily think Dallas is a softer team, but they're coming off a non-playoff season. So I don't know if they qualify as a softer team, but they didn't make the playoffs last year. The Saints didn't make the playoffs last year. So those, I suppose, in the truest sense of the word, they are 2 of the lighter teams on the schedule, if you will. And so the Giants have the opportunity to play 2 of those games in the first 5. And I do think that is a plus. VK says, I'm glad they have a hard schedule. We'll acknowledge we're heading in the correct direction with at least 8 wins. And that certainly makes a lot of sense. No doubt about that. I mean, if the Giants do what they're capable of, and I think, you know, Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated, and by the way, let me just put this out here. If you'd puts the link up here in the chat, if you'd like to chime in, there's a link. Here we go. Paste. There we go. We'll put that up for you. I think it's important. Yeah, as Albert Breer of SI said earlier today on his mailbag, it's very realistic to believe that the Giants will have one of the best defenses in the National Football League, and that the offense should be much improved. And if Russell Wilson can give them competent play, which was the whole reason he was brought in, the Giants could reasonably win 7 or 8 games and be right there at the 500 mark. Now, of course, with 17 games, you have to be 9-8 or 8-9, right? You can't be 500, but you get the gist. And that would certainly be a big advancement over the 3 wins of last year. It would be more than double the amount of wins they had in 2024. So how could you not be impressed with that as things move forward and they try to climb off the floor? Oh, LS says December 3rd is his birthday. Okay, LS, that's cool. Oh, VK, I can't have you be saying anything like that. He was saying that the Giants lost a lot of games in the last 2 seasons by crazy stuff. VK says 8 at least. Isaac Moore says you are what your record says you are. I totally disagree with that. The one motto of Bill Parcells that is actually inaccurate. You can absolutely have a 6-win team. Let's just say, for argument's sake, there's a difference in quality between one 6-win team and another 6-win team. One could have overachieved and gotten 6 wins and been extremely lucky and very healthy. Another 6-win team could have been totally ravaged by injuries and had all their backups struggle and have a very disappointing 6-win season. But you know, when the roster is full and their starters are playing, it is a much better team, therefore a much better roster. So no, 2 6-win teams are not identical, and you are not what your record says you are. Isaac, I've explained this hundreds of times over the years, not only on this show, but on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Big Blue says, Paul, anything to say to Howard Katz and his team on Park Avenue? No. Isaac Morris says, what's more important, winning big or winning close games? Well, as you may know, Isaac, um, a preponderance of games in the National Football League these days are decided by one score. Commissioner Roger Goodell is very proud of that fact. He loves to brag on the evidence that NFL games usually come down to one score and come down to the last 5 minutes. That's a very, 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 very important thing that he cites every time in his State of the League address. So it is more important to win close games because by the very nature of how many there are going to be during the season, that means you're winning more games. Pretty obvious. Christine says, very interesting thoughts on the schedule. That's what we're here for. Gary Gaston says, hi, P-Dot. I'm cool with opening at Washington because, and then we lost the rest of his message. Okay. Gotti Style 12. I agree with you 100%, Paul. I also feel like week 1 can play in our favor. What is your thoughts on that? Well, week 1 will play in the favor of the team that is better prepared. The team that has their I's dotted and their T's crossed and plays sound fundamental football and doesn't look rusty as they begin the season. That's my thought about that philosophically. Now, do I believe Washington's going to take a step back? I absolutely do. I feel pretty strongly about that, even though they've added some players. They added Lattimore, they added Deebo Samuel, they added Tunsil. They made some moves, and they added some players. But I do believe that Jaden Daniels is going to get, some rough spots. Excuse me. Second year, you see what happened with C.J. Stroud. It does tend to happen, right? It does tend to happen. The NFL, these coaches are really smart. They watch film. And they have a whole off season to prepare. And a whole off season to make adjustments. And Jaden Daniels will probably not have nearly as good a season as he had last year. I think in a lot of ways he surprised a lot of people by how strongly he came out of the gate. And it is my opinion that Washington will take a step back. Gary Gaston says we can catch the Commanders off guard. Well, let's put it this way. If Washington truly believes, and I mean this, if they believe all the stuff that the national media keeps saying about the Giants, that they really did deserve to be a bad team, that in their power rankings, they're 30, 31, or 32, coming off a 3-win season, and aren't very good, well, if Washington really believes that, they're in for a huge rude awakening. That I will agree with you on, Gary. I don't know if they're that foolish to actually believe that. I really don't. I mean, I can't imagine a team in the NFC East, especially Washington, who the Giants owned for a ton of years until last season. I can't believe that they would buy all of that smoke that's being put out there by the national media about the Giants. It's a very uninformed and ill-informed opinion. But we'll see. Xavier Baker says 11-6 or 10-7. He's got double-digit wins for the New York Giants this year. Very interesting. Aiden, I see you there in the studio. I'm going to get to you in just 1 second. Gotti Style 12 says, I feel like week 1 is a game we can leave with a win. Well, look, if you don't beat Washington in week 1, you got to beat Dallas in week 2. Okay? To go 0-2 to start the season and to have 0-2 in the NFC East to start the season, That's a big driveway full of hot coals to have to walk across during the rest of the schedule. And Christine says, yeah, feel we have an advantage for week one if due to our defense. Well, yeah. Mr. Daniels, meet Abdul Carter. And we go now to Aiden, who is in on a video chat. How you doing, Aiden?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So glad for you to participate again tonight.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I want to know. I mean, like, I find it pretty unfortunate that like we get like the easier bunch of our opponents like in the second half. And I was wondering, like, I'm sure you know how many years you've been covering the Giants. Like, I mean, you know some stuff from the league perspective of like how they make the schedule. Obviously, the opponents are set for the most part, but I would assume it's based on like travel and also like ratings. But I want to hear from you as far as you know.
I think the best thing for me to do rather than going through all the things that they do to make the sausage,
Mm-hmm.
I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to refer you to Giants.com. I believe it was earlier today. I think Dan Salamone, the senior writer for the website, actually put up a detailed kind of checklist as to how the NFL approaches the schedule and all the factors that they try to take into consideration and try to mishmash together for each of their 32 teams to make the master sched. I think that's probably the best thing for you to do rather than have me try to go into this, which it'll take 2 hours to
Yeah.
explain.
Yeah.
But yes, I will tell you this.
Mm-hmm.
They certainly want marquee players and marquee teams in key spots on the schedule, the primetime games, the holiday games. There's no doubt about that. They look for storylines, absolutely. But see, here's the thing. If you believe what I said before, and again, whether or not you want to call Dallas a softer team, look, for the Giants, that hasn't been a soft team because of the
No.
rivalry. You can kind of throw the records out, right? But
Yeah, that one.
I truly believe the four softer teams that I mentioned earlier,
Yeah,
if you
New
look at the
England.
schedule, right,
Mm-hmm.
in the first half of the schedule, they do have the
Saints.
Saints. Okay? The second half, they get the Bears, they get the Patriots, and they get the Raiders. Again, it depends on how you feel about the Cowboys because there's one in the first half and there's one in the second half. Do you feel that the Cowboys are one of those lesser teams? You could probably make an argument, but then again, based on the rivalry, they've owned the Giants in recent years, so I don't know.
Yeah, but yeah, that's the unfortunate part about like I was saying about the first half, and also about I know you said about you would tell me to like check out that article, but do you know if like the teams have any input on or able to like the front office of if they're
Yeah,
able
the front
to?
the front offices can put in a request. It doesn't mean it will be honored, but they can ask very kindly, would you please not give us a holiday game this year? Or would you please consider giving us two back-to-back West Coast games so that we could stay out there? Remember the Giants stayed in Arizona? They had the
Yeah,
Arizona and San Francisco games back-to-back. You can ask the league, is there a way that you can give us one of those so that we only have to make one West Coast trip? My thought this year was if I were a coach, I would have asked, could we get a request into the league to have Denver and Las Vegas back to back?
mm-hmm.
Because those are two road games, and they're the two furthest trips that the Giants will have to make by plane this year. I think that would have been very advantageous to have to melt those two trips together. It did not happen. I don't know if they asked. I really don't know if they did. But
Yeah.
they didn't get it. Regardless, they didn't get it. That would have been something that I would like to have seen the league do. And I certainly would have liked to see them break up the two NFC East games on the road to start the season. if there would be two things that I would say to the NFL offices, earlier we saw the chat saying, "Hey, you want to direct something to Mr. Katz?" That's what I would have said. Could you have given them back-to-back West Coast games to help their travel situation? And did you really have to make the first two games road games in the division?
I know exactly. I mean, even having two road games to start the regular season, I mean that's pretty rough, especially that they're both division games.
I told you it's an aberration. It doesn't happen very often. I cited you the stats earlier tonight.
Yeah, I agree with what somebody said in the chat, and you were chiming on too about that Washington overachieved last year, and I think yeah we could win week one, and I really get the hype. I'm looking at their schedule. They literally like have three 1 o'clock games and 5 primetime games and an international game. Like I mean, I think Jaden Daniels is going to take a step back.
Well, I think that Daniels surprised a lot of people out of the gate.
Yeah, for sure.
And so there's no doubt in my mind that their record was a bit more inflated, even though he progressed and got more complicated, more complex with his offense. Though, should I say, the scheme, the coaching staff allowed him to do more later on in the year. But early in the season, things were just very basic. And they were very, very lucky on a number of instances when they
That,
won games. I do believe Washington will take a step back. I don't know if Philadelphia will or won't. I mean, look what they did last year. They were just so impressive. It was their year. So I don't know that I necessarily know if they'll come back to earth. Um, I'm not overly impressed with Dallas, but
yeah.
let's face it, they got to do some retooling just like the Giants do. So they're kind of an unknown right now.
Yeah, and what I want to about prime time, I feel like, I mean, it's good that we have 2 of the 3 prime time games at home, even that Kansas City's really tough and the Eagles are coming off the Super Bowl and then Patriots on the road. I feel like, I mean, the thing with prime time, we haven't been very good, but so, I mean, the thing was Daniel Jones was very poor on prime time, and I feel like yeah, Russell Wilson's always been pretty good on prime time, so I feel like maybe that's not the worst thing.
Well, look, primetime games on the road against tough teams, especially if they're far away, you've got to travel across the country. Those are the worst kinds of games you could have. The
For,
Giants avoided those. Okay, they got two very, very tough home primetime games, but at least they're home. And the road primetime game is against a lesser Patriots team, and
mm-hmm.
it's in Foxborough. I mean,
Yeah,
that's a touchdown pass away. You couldn't have logistically an easier primetime schedule than what the Giants have.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, just I wish even if we had like 1 or 2, if even if we had instead of just the Saints, I wish he could swap one of those games out. Maybe have either the Vikings or the Bears. I feel like that would make it somewhat easier. But the thing I told you like recently is that I mean you don't know how teams are going to be, especially at some stages. Like you don't know week 9. The 49ers are always banged up with injuries. We could get lucky. It's about when you play these teams.
No doubt. No doubt. It's always about when you play them. You know, I mean, the availability of guys in the starting lineup at the time you kick it off against that team is going to say a whole lot more than anything else we talk about tonight.
Absolutely, and it's also about like how the players are playing. I mean, if you're on a hot streak versus a cold streak, things like that. I mean, it's not you. I feel like there's a lot of people who like to once the schedule comes out, they like to mark off win loss, win loss. I mean, you see upsets all the time in the NFL, injuries. Like I said, you cannot predict these things. It's possible. I mean, I bet nobody had the Commanders going to the playoffs last year when they saw the schedule. I mean, it's really, and the amount of playoff teams that change from one year to the next, it's truly insane.
Marking off wins and losses on the schedule at this point in the calendar is about as useless as trying to get sticky bubble gum off the bottom of your sneaker on a very hot day.
I like that. Definitely. I mean, people who do that, I don't know what they're thinking.
Well, they do it because they need conversation pieces. That's why. They need conversation pieces.
Yeah.
And, look, you can look at the schedule, you can get an idea for the kind of team it is, you can get an idea for the style that they play, you can get an idea based on the units, the matchups that might be interesting in the game. And going in, this is going to be a very, very difficult schedule for the Giants. Sure, there's a possibility that some of these teams will disappoint, some of them will have injuries, and maybe the games will be easier than others. That could happen. But as we sit here today, in general, it's fair and reasonable to say it's a difficult schedule. But that's about as far as anybody should rationally go.
Yeah, I feel like, don't you feel it? I feel like this should is a good test for Russell Wilson. I feel like he had a fairly easy schedule when he was with Pittsburgh last year, and it really shows up to gives him a test to see what he has left in him. I mean, he has 1 year, but that we just to be able to tell what direction we're going to be able to go this year.
Well, let's put it this way, Aiden. I don't think there's any doubt the Giants have to shake their September doldrums. This team has had a very, very rough time in September for most of the past decade. They need to get off to better starts. And it's not just about the one loss record and the play on the field. It's also, they're human beings. The outside noise is going to get very, very loud, and could cause distractions that could help send things into a spiral if they get off to a really bad start to begin the
Yeah.
season.
I mean, I don't want people screaming for Jackson Dart in October. That would not
Oh my
be good.
goodness. Some people are already talking about
I
that
know
now. That's how ridiculous they
people
are.
are crazy.
Well, I won't use that word, but they certainly are unrealistic. How about that?
Yeah, and some people, I mean, there's some people calling for the Giants with the schedule already. They're like, oh, we should just lose and get another high draft pick. I mean, like you said on the kickoff live today, you said people who root for the team who lose aren't real fans.
Well, I don't think that's actually the phrase I used. I simply said
Something,
it angers me to no degree, and I don't understand how they could feel that way.
yeah,
It's just not productive. It makes absolutely
no,
no sense at all.
no, and like what you were saying is about you, like you're always in the locker room and you really see and feel their emotions and know how much every game means to them, even if like they're out of contention, like everything they really put work like
And,
every day
yeah,
all year long.
and Aiden, I'm in the locker room after those games. We do the post-game show on MSG television. We bring you the stuff that I'm getting from the locker room. Last year during the Giants' very difficult season, how many times you saw, the mic in front of those players, and there were guys furious at losing. They were angry. They were sick of it. They were disgusted by it. If you couldn't tell as a viewer from watching those locker room clips how nauseated those players were, then you're just not paying attention.
Yeah, I mean, you can hear I mean, even when you just hear the audio, I feel like even in the tone of their voice, I mean, you could hear the disappointment, and then when they win, you could hear how cheery and happy they are to get the win, even so late in the season, after they beat the Colts, you really could hear how excited the players were.
Yeah, it was almost like a New Year's Eve celebration when they beat the Colts. I mean, seriously, there was that much angst and that much disgust that was momentarily washed away by just one victory.
Mm-hmm.
Because look, who wants to break their butts time and time and time and time again and then not get any reward for it? Who wants that? Who
Nobody.
who do, who do you know that constantly wants to get beaten down and doesn't get anything productive out of their work? I don't know anybody like that. Do you?
That's just foolish.
Exactly. So, but somehow there are people on the outside of the building. There are those, and again, I don't know what the numbers are, but there are those who just don't understand that concept. Maybe these people are aliens or androids, and they don't have a soul. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
I don't know.
Anyway, Aiden, let me go and get back to some of these other chats and stuff. Hopefully, someone else will call in or video in like you did. And I
Yep.
always appreciate you being on the
All
program.
right. Good talking to you.
Thank you. Stay well. Aiden, always one of our regular people here on the Big Blue Kickoff Live show, and we're glad to have him. And let me see if I can get myself centered, although some people think I'm always off center. There we are. All right, let's go back to the chats. And see, folks, it's really easy to call in. If you want to use your microphone, you could be an audio call. If you want to use your camera, you could be a video call. MB Goblin says, if our offense is able to stay on the field and give our defense rest, I think we skyrocket into a very competitive team. We lost a good amount of close games last year. Time to close that gap. Look, there's no question, right? If you're not an elite teams can sometimes just bowl you over. Defense can just dominate you and beat you with defense. Or in the case of the Eagles last year, their offensive line can just go in there and knock you out. Just get into a slugfest and say, we're just going to put you on the ground and we're going to run all over you and we're just going to take what we want. That happens with some of the elite teams in the league. That's why they're as good as they are, because they can do that. They could just take one facet of the game and bludgeon you. But for most teams, that's not the case, especially for a team like the Giants that's trying to get back to a competitive level. They need to play, and you know the magic word, complementary football. MB Goblin, here's what I'll tell you. I feel extremely confident by the guys who were signed in free agency and the guys who were drafted. The Giants special teams unit is going to be something to watch this season. They are going to be really, really strong. When you have very strong special teams and a strong defense, which we also assume is going to be much improved for the Giants this year, well, guess what? That's 2/3 of the game. That puts you in much better position to play complementary football and to be competitive. Your offense doesn't even have to be overly exciting and special. They just have to be pretty good. Because if you know that you can win special teams almost every week, and you know your defense is good enough to keep you in almost every game, every week, takes a ton of pressure off of your offense. And Russell Wilson, over his career, we've already told you, better than a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's not going to give the ball away. He will manage a game, and he can also hit big plays downfield. This Giants team, they're going about it the right way. They really are. They're going right to the first chapter in Football 101. To climb out of the quicksand, dominate on special teams, and do your darndest to be as good a defense as you possibly can. It's a lot easier to get back to respectability and win games through special teams and defense than it is through offense and trying to outscore people in shootouts. It really is. So I love the strategy and the road that the Giants have taken to try to get this thing back on track. It makes an awful lot of sense. Tim Frith 24 says, will the Giants beat the Commanders, the Cowboys, the Chiefs, and the Chargers and begin 2025 at 4-0? I'm sorry. I don't mean to laugh, but it's these hypotheticals that really crack you up in the middle of May. What else can I say? Christine says, you never know, but it will be difficult. That's a good answer, Christine. Excellent answer, by the way. Isaac Morris says, do you think they trade Winston to the Saints or anyone else to try to keep Tommy Cutlets? Well, I didn't understand all of the knee-jerk reaction when Derek Carr retired from the Saints. There was a knee-jerk reaction from some media and some fans that immediately said, well, Jameis Winston was with New Orleans. Why don't the Giants trade him and let him go back to the Saints? But here's the problem with that thinking. If you really peel back the layers of the onion, Kellen Moore, who was the offensive coordinator last year for the Philadelphia Eagles after, some years with the Dallas Cowboys as an offensive assistant, he is the new head coach with the New Orleans Saints. Kellen Moore was not there when Jameis Winston was there. So he has no connection to Jameis Winston. In fact, Kellen Moore has a much stronger connection with Pickett of the Cleveland Browns. Why? Because Pickett was a backup last year with the Philadelphia Eagles, while Kellen Moore was their offensive coordinator. Pickett is on the Cleveland Browns. They just drafted 2 quarterbacks. They have 5 quarterbacks right now that they're taking through spring drills. It seems much more logical that Kellen Moore would pick up the phone and call Cleveland and ask about Pickett than it does for him to pick up the phone and ask about Jameis Winston. He's much more likely to want to work with a young quarterback who still may have some upside, who he's already got a tremendous amount of knowledge of, and who has run the type of system that he was involved with in Philadelphia. That makes a whole lot more sense than picking up the phone and having the Saints and Giants have a conversation about Jameis Winston. Now, it's not that it could never happen. Anything is possible. But if you really just want to use common sense and connect the dots, it makes an awful lot more sense that Kellen Moore would be interested in Pickett more than Winston. Now, as far as the Giants are concerned, they signed Jameis Winston to a 2-year contract to be the number 2 quarterback this season behind Russell Wilson, as they try to win as many games as they possibly can. I don't get the impression that as this season goes on, if they can be competitive and Russell Wilson should get hurt, I don't think they were ready to turn the season over to Tommy DeVito, or they wouldn't have signed Winston. And I don't think they have any inclination to force Jackson Dart into the lineup either. So if you're the Giants staff, Brian Dable, Mike Kafka, Shea Tierney, the guys who are most involved with the quarterback, Tierney the quarterback's coach, Kafka the offensive coordinator, and of course Dable the head coach. If you're those guys, it seems to me, and we could talk about a variety of hypotheticals and circumstances, it just does really seem to me that they're not interested in dealing a Jameis Winston. I think they got Winston here because they saw an economically friendly quarterback who's played in this league before, who could potentially give them a chance to be competitive if called upon, because they believe that the defense and the special teams are going to be so good that they can compete in some games with a experienced quarterback who has won games in the NFL before. I think they believe that Tommy DeVito right now is a number 3 quarterback. But because Jackson Dart was drafted, Tommy DeVito is now their number 4. And I've said this before. I think they'll keep all 4 during training camp and the preseason. I do believe that if Tommy DeVito gets waived and he would be number 4, you're only going to keep 3 on the 53. So if Tommy DeVito gets waived, I do believe he'll be claimed, because he's clearly good enough to be a number 3 on most of the teams in the National Football League. But I don't think the Giants felt, after watching him for 2 seasons, that he was a solid enough number 2. And that's why they signed Winston. I hope I've given you a full enough explanation on that topic, Isaac. I've tried to do this in bits and pieces several times over the past couple of months. But again, this topic keeps coming up with some people, and I'm not sure why. MB Goblin says, no way are they giving up Winston when they have him on a contract for multiple seasons. They do have him for 2 years on this deal. Christine says she agrees with that. Mikey C says, let's go Big Blue. Shout out to the true insider of the G-Men. P-Dot. The schedule means nothing. 1 game at a time. Oh, Gotti Style 12. I feel like we can win week 1 and build momentum. Well, look. Here's the point. It's not so much momentum. It's more confidence and belief. If you win early, you have more belief in what it is that you're doing, and therefore you will have more confidence when faced with actual competition the following Sunday. Momentum, that's more of a scientific term. And as everybody says, momentum is only as good as your next kickoff, or in baseball, it's only as good as your next starting pitcher. I'm not one who believes as much in momentum as I believe in belief and confidence. I think those are 2 much more important factors. Momentum is just a pretty word that people can throw out there and doesn't really hold a lot of beef or juice in a locker room. It does, however, in a particular game. You can definitely, because of emotion and adrenaline, you can take momentum swings back and forth during the course of a game. But I don't think that necessarily happens week to week to week to week. That's more about belief and confidence than it is momentum. Big Blue says, do you see Dart getting a start this season? Does DeVito make the roster? I've already addressed the DeVito question. I think there has to be a very specific set of circumstances for Dart to get a start this year. It's much more likely you might see him in mop-up duty either way toward the end of the season in a game that has already been put out of reach one way or the other. I think that's much more likely, than Dart getting a start. Could he get one? It's possible. Best case scenario, Dart doesn't see the field and he redshirts this year. And Wilson and or Winston, if he has to play, does a good enough job to get the Giants back to respectability without having to dip into the depth chart. Prepare yourself for Dart to have a redshirt season and not to play. This way, if he does, it's a pleasant surprise, and you'll feel really good about the fact that he's progressed so quickly that the coaching staff felt he was ready to go into a game. If you go into this season as a fan thinking, when are we going to see Dart? Because we really have to see him this year before the season is over, then you're going to be frustrated and let down if he doesn't play a snap. Do you understand? I'm just trying to help you out emotionally here. I don't want you guys to feel angry, frustrated, or disappointed. The best way to avoid that is think of Dart as a red shirt and then be pleasantly surprised if he does take a snap in a regular season game. That's really the best way to go about doing this. And believe me, the number one factor for Dart is going to be his progress. There's no way the Giants are going to prematurely put him into a game unless they totally believe that he is ready to go. It's not going to happen. Big Blue wants to know, does Bellinger make the team? Who will be your field goal kicker? Well, yes, I do believe that Bellinger is going to be on the team. He will remain tight end number 2. And unless Graham Gano gets injured, I have no reason to believe that he won't be the field goal kicker. Now, if the Giants do need to get some money on the salary cap, Gano is making a large buck, one of the highest paid kickers in the NFL. Is that something that the Giants want to deal with his contract? Do they want to touch it? Do they want to do something with him? I don't know the answer to that. But I do know this, if he's healthy, economics aside, they certainly want him to be the kicker this year. Mikey C says, it's Christine, it's G-Men Nation time. Richard Marzullo says, the NFL hasn't seen a Giants team like this in a long time. We opened MetLife 2-0. Richard, the problem is the first 2 games on the schedule are on the road. It's a nice thought, but doesn't apply to the 2025 season. Let's see here. So Dan Smith says, why is Dallas in the North or NFC East Division? Oh, boy. That's an answer that I really don't have. When the National Football League decided to create their divisions, you'll remember back in 1970, the AFL and NFL merged, and it became the NFC and the AFC. And Dallas wound up being put in the NFC East. That's the way it worked out. It is a very hot and fierce rivalry. The league is very sensitive to rivalries, and I don't think that they have had much conversation to change those types of rivalries. Now, you'll recall the St. Louis Cardinals were also in the NFC East for a long time. And then, they moved and became the Phoenix Cardinals, and they became the Arizona Cardinals, and they still stayed in the NFC East until I want to say 2002. I'm pretty sure that was the last year. Let me see here. Oh, it was 2001. 2001 was the last year that the Arizona Cardinals were in the NFC East. I happen to have some notes that I had taken earlier about the schedule, and I'd written that down for some reason. Yeah, the Arizona Cardinals, after the 2001 season, they were moved out of the NFC East. Remember, there was some expansion. You had the Seattle Seahawks come in. You had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers come in. And, then, they did some shuffling. And, Houston Texans came into the league. They created a new Cleveland Browns because, you had the Cleveland Browns move to Baltimore and become the Ravens after the Indianapolis Colts were created because the Baltimore Colts wanted to leave Baltimore. Oh, so much. Not to even mention the Rams, who were in Los Angeles, then went to St. Louis, and then went, oh, what a mess. And then went back to Los Angeles. Whatever. Anyway, so Dan Smith, I don't know exactly why the Dallas Cowboys were put in the NFC East at that point in time. I really don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry. It never really was something that I felt compelled to research. MB Goblin says to make room for Jerry's ego. Mikey C says, I guess Christine and every Giant Man's fans, let's enjoy every game. G-Man, man your battle stations. The baby commanders is not ready for you. Okay. Here's Sanders. Schedule is you have 8 games against your division. You play 1 division FC. Yeah, yes. I mean, Sanders, was anybody asking about the schedule? I don't believe so. We all know that it's a 17 game schedule played over 18 weeks. You get 1 bye week. You get your rotation of divisions. Then you get your TBA games, which are involved in a divisional rotation as well. And then one of those 3 games at the back of the schedule becomes that 17th that you play cross conference. I don't know that anybody needed an explanation, but Sanders, thanks for chiming in and allowing me to repeat it one more time. Isaac Moore says, might get flexed out of prime time. I mean, heck, I didn't see what else is on the schedule the week the Giants play in New England. I mean, in theory, those 2 teams could be struggling. And at that point in the season, that might be a game that could get moved out. I would think that's a possibility. I've kind of lost track, to be honest with you. I believe they set certain parameters for Sunday night games and Monday night games that can be flexed. I don't think they can flex Thursday night games, but the game against the Eagles on Thursday Night Football is in week 6. So they're not going to do anything to that. So, yeah, I would think the Patriots game in week 13 does have the potential, Isaac, to get bumped out. Billboards Bills says the past few years when the opponent's starting quarterback went down, the backup looked like the best quarterback on their team. Aiden Fink says to trade Winston, something would have to happen like when Bridgewater got hurt right before the season and Philly traded Bradford to Minnesota. Oh, again, Aiden, yeah, it can happen. I'm not saying it can happen. But anybody who understands football, if they were trying to think about who the Saints might want to go after, Kellen Moore has a better, stronger connection with Pickett than he does with Winston. That should have been the obvious knee-jerk reaction if somebody wanted to connect the dots. The connection to Winston just did not nearly make as much sense. Tisvi Mizra says, get him Oil D. 8-8-1 is his projected record. Well, how about that? Technically, 8-8-1 is not 500, but it kind of is. Depends on how you want to calculate it, I suppose. Let's see. He also adds, if adversity don't break you, it makes you best way for life to become men. Best way for life, I guess. Play the best teams in NFL. Set us up for 2026. Christine says, Paul, I agree with you on Dart. Okay. Let's see here. Truly enjoy the show. All do well. Thank you, Christine. I appreciate it very much. I hope everybody enjoys the program. Aiden Fink says they did flex a Thursday night game last year for the first time. Aiden, I don't remember if they did or not. You know, to be frank with you, during the course of the NFL season, because of my job, daily covering practice, doing Big Blue Kickoff Live, obviously I'm doing these Sports Illustrated shows as well, and then on game day, pregame and postgame, I am so neck deep in the Giants, looking at the tape, looking at the game from the previous week, looking at the opponent that they're going to play next week. I'm so knee deep. I'll be frank with you. It's hard for me to keep track of all the logistics of the rest of the league. Do I watch other games when I get a chance? Yes, I do. Do I keep track of the standings and the scores and some of the key injuries? Yes, I do. But I don't play fantasy football. I have no interest in playing fantasy football. And therefore, am I on top of every logistical change that's made with a lineup on every team in the league? No, I am not. Am I concerned about games getting flexed from 1 o'clock to 4:30 or from Thursday to Sunday or Monday if they're not the Giants? No, I'm not. I'm just being honest with you. Believe me, with the kind of time that I devote during the season, from training camp all the way till the end of the season, the kind of time that I devote to do my job to try to give you guys the best coverage that I can provide, there's just not enough hours in the day to start, dealing with the logistics of how other teams' schedules are impacted. Aiden says Chargers and Broncos, I think it was. All right, so remember, folks, we bring you the Big Blue Breakdown live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We take your chats, we take your audio calls, and your video calls. In addition to that, okay, we have what we did last week when the Brandon Short interview was done early in the program, and we pulled it out and we separated it on the New York Giants on SI YouTube channel. If you're just interested in the analysis of the favorable elements of the Giants' schedule, there were 6 of them, and there were 3 very unfavorable elements of the Giants' schedule. If you're just interested in that part of the program, you could still go to the archive and pull up this show. But if you just want to get the first 25 minutes, which strictly has all of the analysis and doesn't include all of the chats and the phone calls or video calls that we entertained, you can do that too. We're going to try doing this for a while and see if we can separate some of the beef stuff up front from the rest of the program when we react to all of your questions and comments, and see if you guys like that. You let me know, right? You let me know. You can give me comments over the course of time and let me know if you guys like that better or not, because on the archive, I know it can be difficult sometimes to download a longer program on the archive, and then you're left searching for things, and maybe you just don't have the time to listen to all the stuff or the other questions that people are asking. Maybe you just wanted to hear the key topic of the program. Well, we're going to try to restrict that to the first 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so, and we'll break that apart separately, and again, put that on a separate link on the YouTube channel. And this way you guys can just digest that. And perhaps that suits your needs a little bit better in terms of the time you have and your lifestyle. C-Mac the Cable Guy says at least we get them early before injuries set in. Well, you're right. You're absolutely right in that regard. It could always go the other way. Get the 2 NFC East games out of the way right up top in the first 2 weeks of the season because you think your team's going to be healthy. And you won't have to worry about guys being banged up and maybe not being able to play. Yes, C-Mac the Cable Guy, that's absolutely a possibility. I mean, when you deal with these hypotheticals, things could always go heads or things can always go tails. Aiden says stinks that we have to play Mahomes in September. I don't know. Does it? Does it really stink? Maybe he'll get out of the gate slow. Maybe he'll be, a little discombobulated out of the gate. Maybe it's going to take him a little bit more time to find a rhythm. Here's what I do know. You don't want to play him down the stretch when they're making a playoff run. That I know. And you certainly don't want to play him in the postseason. Although, in this case, that would mean the Giants are playing Kansas City in the Super Bowl. So on second thought, Aiden, maybe that's a great idea. Play Mahomes in the postseason. Aiden says, yeah, Mahomes is 19-4 in September. Yeah, well, guess what? He's got a pretty darn good record in every month of the NFL calendar. Folks, thanks for joining us tonight on the Big Blue Breakdown Live. We appreciate everybody for participating into tonight's show. And again, check the archive if you missed any part of the program or want to go back to the exclusive 25-minute analysis up top of the positives and negatives of the New York Giants 2025 schedule. So until next time, we'll see you next Wednesday night for another live show at 8 p.m. Eastern Time here on the Big Blue Breakdown Live. I'm Paul Dottino, and we will catch you then. So long, everybody.